Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Genesis chapters 12 through 22 in our study of the Old Testament. If you'll remember, we divided the book of Genesis, into two different parts. The first section, Genesis chapters 1 through 11, lists four major events that are predominant. First of all, there's the creation, then the fall into sin, the flood in the days of Noah, and finally the Tower of Babel. Those four major events take us through the first section of the book of Genesis. Then when we come to chapters 12 through 50, notice that's a much larger section. We're going to have four people who are predominant. There are other people that will be mentioned, but these four are the major players. They will be Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. So as we look at this twofold way of looking at Genesis, first of all, we look at the race as a whole in creation and the fall. Of course, the race was only two people at that point, and the flood and the Tower of Babel. That's all of the human race. That's everyone. And then in chapters 12 through 50, we see just the family of Abraham, as that goes from father to son to grandson to the children of Jacob. The first section takes place over a period of more than 2,000 years. I'm not willing to say exactly how much because I haven't figured that out yet. But there's lots and lots and lots of years. Then the entire second part of Genesis, from Abraham to Joseph, takes place around 250 years, a much smaller period, even though there's a great more chapters and verses that are given over to that section. In Genesis chapter 11, verse 27, we're introduced to this section dealing with Abraham. Abraham's going to be the son of Terah, and we read that these are the records of the generations of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran, three sons, and then we're also told that Haran became the father of Lot, because Lot's going to be a significant player as he relates to Abram. And then we see that Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldees. This tells us the location where our story is beginning. And Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Ishcah. Sarah was barren, and that's where our focus comes to. That Sarah is barren and she had no child, and this is going to set the stage for a promise that is given to Abraham, the promise that he would be the father of many nations. But before we even get to that promise, we have a problem with the promise, and the problem that Sarai is barren and she has no child. So here's Abram, childless Abram, married to childless Sarai. Verse 31 says that Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law his son Abram's wife. And they went out together from Ur of the Chaldeans in order to enter the land of Canaan. So they went as far as Haran and settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So on a map we look at Ur. That's the traditional location of Ur. It was excavated by Sir Leonard Woolley in the 1920s. And Abram leaves that area with Terah and comes up to this place known as Haran. The term means crossroads, and it's there that Terah dies, and that's going to be the next part of the journey, as Abram is going to leave Haran and come down into the land of Canaan. This is introduced in chapter 12, verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you." That term country is the Hebrew word aretz. It's the same word that was used to describe the earth back in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So go forth from this part of the earth to another part of the earth, to the land that I'm going to show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so you shall be a blessing. There's a bit of a play on words where he's going to make Abram's name great. Remember that one of the sons of Noah had been named Shem, and the name Shem just means name. And God had made a Shem for Shem, and now God's going to make a Shem for Abram. And he's going to make Abram's name great. And I will bless those who bless you, And the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. So there's a promise to Abram that he's going to be a blessing to the entire world. We could call the story of Abram the story of how God blesses the world through one man. And notice it's not the families of the earth, same term that's used earlier, but this time it's the word Adama, all the families of the ground. Just a synonym for earth, meaning the same general idea. And so Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his nephew. Now we saw that they had left from Ur to come to Haran, and now they set out for the land of Canaan, and thus they came to the land of Canaan. So it's not just Abram and Sarai his wife, but also Lot is part of that group who comes down into the land of Canaan, and that's going to be very significant to us. Well, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants, literally to your seed, I will give this land. And that reminds us that back in Genesis chapter 3, God had given some very specific promises about the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. And now to Abram's seed, they're also given a promise. They're going to be given this land. So Abram comes and he builds an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. And that's going to set up the pattern where we'll see Abram comes into the land, he builds an altar, he calls upon the name of the Lord. He goes to another place, he builds an altar, he calls upon the name of the Lord, goes down to Egypt, doesn't build any altars there, but he comes back from Egypt, and again he builds an altar and calls upon the name of the Lord. Now, Abram's been given a promise that he's going to have a seed to his descendants. And so far, the only one in the running, the only relative that he has who could be a potential heir, would be Lot, the nephew of Abram. And according to the culture of that day, if a person didn't have any sons of his own, then perhaps he might take and adopt a nephew, some sort of relative that's close by. And so we're naturally inclined to think Lot just might be that adopted relative. It might be through Lot to whom this promise refers. And yet when they come back out of Egypt, after that brief interlude, Abram goes down to Egypt with Sarai, and he gets into trouble. He says, she's not my wife, she's my sister. And some things happen, but it all turns out for the best, and they all come back out of the land. But they come back into the land of Canaan, and now there's some division between Abram and Lot. The land isn't just big enough for the both of them. Their herds have grown to the point where they're starting to compete, and they separate, so Lot will not be that promised heir. Lot goes down to the city of Sodom and settles there, and meanwhile Abraham is left in the land by himself. So it won't be, the descendant will not be Lot, the nephew of Abram. Next we wonder, when we get to Genesis chapter 15, we're told that Abram has a heir, not Lot anymore, but now it's Eliezer of Damascus. And in Genesis 15:4 we read that, behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this man, referring to Eliezer of Damascus, will not be your heir, but instead you're going to have an heir who will come from your own body, and he shall be your heir. Let's jump into the classroom to see some so it's not really live, but some recorded discussion about this very point. And God says, then behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this man will not be your heir, but one who shall come forth from your own body, he shall be your heir. You're going to have somebody who's born from you. A son of your own, not just a son of somebody else that you adopt. All right? And to give evidence to that, the Lord takes them through a covenant-cutting ceremony. We talked last time about this idea of a covenant. We said, what's involved in a covenant?
Sacrifice.
There's a sacrifice. What else?
The splitting of the animal.
The splitting of the animal. Hold that. There's a curse involved. That's right. Now, there's relationships and there's promises, but there's a curse and a cutting of an animal, so that you always cut a covenant. You take an animal and you would kill it and you would cut it in two, and you'd separate the pieces, and then you would pass between the pieces. And what you're doing as you pass between the pieces, you're saying, if I don't keep my part of the covenant, may what happened to that animal happen to me. And Abram's told, So he said, this is chapter 15, verse 9 and 10. So he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer and a 3-year-old female goat and a 3-year-old ram and a turtle dove and a young pigeon. And he brought these all to him and cut them in two. And
I'm sorry. I'm trying to stop it.
oh, it's okay.
I was turning it off.
And he brought all these to him and cut them in two and laid each half opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds. And it came about when the sun had set that it was very dark, and behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch which passed between the pieces. So Abram gets all the things prepared for a typical covenant cutting ceremony. And he's got, go ahead.
This great darkness, or for a great darkness.
Yes.
Here?
That's a great question. I'm going to ask you that in just a second. Excellent question. You're thinking right along with me. It gets dark. They're ready for the covenant ceremony to take place. A deep sleep falls upon Abram, and he doesn't pass between pieces. At least we don't read of him doing it. Instead, we read about there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch in the middle of this darkness that shows up and passes between the pieces. Now, I think we get an idea. Who's the smoking oven and the burning torch? Yeah, that's the presence of God. But why is it called a smoking oven and a burning torch? Why doesn't it just say, and God passed between the pieces?
Because in the tabernacle, that's how he showed himself.
Yes! That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You have Moses writing this, and he's writing this to the Israelites who have come out of Egypt, and if they, they're hearing this for the first time, and if they look out their tent, they can see, for a much bigger tent, the tabernacle, and they can see, if it's daytime, they can see a smoking oven. If it's nighttime, they can see a burning torch, and that's been taking them through the wilderness. It's the same God who is leading them right now that made this promise to Abram so many hundreds of years earlier. It's the same God yesterday, today, and forever. And so we read on that day, the Lord, our translation says, made a covenant. Literally, it's he cut a covenant with Abram. And God takes Abram through this process where God is saying, if I don't keep my promise to you, Abram, may I cease to exist. May what happened to those animals happen to the God of the universe. That's a promise on which you can bank. That's a promise you can claim and to which you can hold.